Summary: Paris faced challenges with new chef Nick, who displayed unprofessional behavior in the galley and made inappropriate comments about her body. Chef Nick's quirky personality clashed with the crew, leading to discomfort and tension, especially with Paris. Despite defending his behavior, Chef Nick needs to address his interactions with Paris to maintain harmony within the crew. Below Deck Season 11's newest stew. Paris Field may have joined the St. David's crew later than her fellow crewmates, but the way Chef Nick Tatlock is treating her is unacceptable. While Chef Nick is the newest member of the St. David crew, his behavior was on full display during his first charter of the season, and many were displeased with the way he spoke to Paris. Chef Nick came into the charter late, replacing Chef Anthony Irricane after he was let go by Captain Kerry Titherage. Despite an outwardly cool demeanor, Chef Nick has already struggled with his behavior. Paris's time on the St. David has been relatively simple prior to dealing with Nick's behavior, especially considering her time aboard superyachts has been extensive. Coming from a background of yachting, Paris has been on the sidelines of Below Deck for years. Having been in a relationship with Below Deck Season 9's deckhand Jake Fowler, Paris has relationships with other Below Deck cast members. Coming into the season with a pre-existing relationship with Chief Stew Fraser Allender, Paris was able to fit into the St. David crew without much issue. Now, with Nick joining the team, things have become trickier. Related 20 best reality TV shows. Right now, reality TV is more popular than ever. With so many to choose from, here are some of the best reality TV shows to stream or watch right now. Paris is the newest stew aboard St. David. She joined during a difficult time. Paris's journey to joining the St. David crew may have been easier, but the crew had been struggling prior to her arrival on the superyacht. Early on in the charter season, Fraser had a crew of 3 stews for the interior team. Zandy Olivier, Barbie Pasquale, and Kat Baugh were working well together during the first charter when it became clear to Barbie that Kat was struggling to take any sort of direction about the work she needed to do. Kat shared that her experiences aboard superyachts weren't like what she was facing on St. David, which left her stressed. Barbie and Kat had their differences, which made it tough for Fraser to manage the stews. While Kat was having emotional breakdowns and felt like she wasn't able to connect with the rest of the crew, Barbie was struggling to work with someone who wasn't on her level. Both women brought their issues to Fraser, who wasn't able to separate his personal feelings about Kat from his professional behavior. Though Fraser tried to help, Kat continued to spiral, and after feeling overwhelmed for several charters, she chose to leave St. David. Paris was the replacement who took over for Kat. Chef Nick joined the crew after Chef Anthony was let go. He was the replacement for a solid chef. Close. Chef Nick is the newest member of the St. David's crew, but he's appeared to already have made himself welcome with the rest of the staff. After the majority of the charter season was spent with Chef Anthony, things were beginning to deteriorate in the galley. Chef Anthony, who struggles with dyslexia, was having a hard time keeping the kitchen organized while accounting for the differences in what the charter guests were looking for. While the chef was having a hard time, the St. David crew weren't helping out to make things easier. Although Chef Anthony had a high level of skill, he was struggling to prepare dishes that followed the primary guest's wishes, and wasn't able to keep track of everything coming and going from the galley. Ultimately, though he was a skilled chef, Captain Carey had to let Chef Anthony go, and needed to bring in a replacement. Arriving on an off day, Chef Nick was the style of chef that Captain Carey had been looking for. Seasoned and set in his ways, Chef Nick may be somewhat quirky, the chef has been able to integrate with the crew. Paris Chef Nick got off to an odd start. Nick's behavior confused Paris, although Chef Nick was a welcome addition to St. David. After Chef Anthony's departure, his introduction to the rest of the crew was somewhat clunky. Meeting with Captain Carey first, Chef Nick discussed his processes with the captain and was welcomed onto the team. The crew took a backseat for the meeting, getting the chance to judge the chef before they were able to speak to him. The crew all seemed to feel that Chef Nick seemed like a nice guy, but he was older and somewhat quirkier than they expected for a superyacht chef. After having him with them on the superyacht for a day, the crew was able to make some more detailed judgments about the chef. During their first charter, things were tricky as the primary guest had detailed that he didn't like any excess oil in his dishes. Fraser was requesting to have the plates garnished before they were delivered to the guests, but Chef Nick refused to follow any orders. While his working behavior was odd, his personal behavior was even more confusing. Paris, in particular, felt somewhat uncomfortable with the way that Chef Nick was treating her. Paris wasn't comfortable with Nick's comments. He was inappropriate about her body. After meeting the chef, it felt obvious that Paris would have some difficulty with his attitude despite being pretty easygoing herself. Paris, a fellow Australian, believed she would get along with the chef fairly easily, but things broke down in their communication quickly. After asking repeatedly on Fraser's behalf if Nick would garnish the guests' dishes, Paris felt that the way Nick was speaking to her was unprofessional. Between his coded remarks that seemed somewhat sexual in nature to his jokes about her gender, Paris didn't appreciate Nick's candor, but ultimately chose to let it go for the crew's sake. Later on, Paris encountered Nick again while he was making a crew meal, and his comments about her eating habits, which led to comments about her weight, were unprofessional. Nick watched Paris put mayonnaise on her wrap, and after sharing that she loved mayonnaise, he mentioned she should probably limit her intake. When Paris countered and shared that she didn't much care for his tone, Nick made some comments about her weight that made Paris visibly uncomfortable. Nick tried to defend his behavior. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong. Although Nick wasn't able to make connections with the rest of the crew right off the bat, his biggest issue should be fixing his working relationship with Paris. If the stew continues to find Nick's comments about her uncomfortable, it may cause an issue among the rest of the crew. Paris may not be overly upset with the way Nick's speaking about her currently, but Nick has defended his behavior already, meaning he'll likely do so again. If Below Deck's new chef wants to keep his place on the St. David crew, he may need to take accountability. Below Deck airs Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time on Bravo, then streams the following day on Peacock. Below Deck is a reality television series and franchise that has seen many spin-offs since its creation in 2013. The original series follows the lives of a crew that lives on a superyacht called Honor and chronicles their experiences during charter season.